The morning light over Los Angeles seemed almost merciful, softening the edges of a city that thrived on perfection and pretense. It was the eve of Hope's wedding, a day meant to symbolize reconciliation, endurance, and second chances. The Forrester estate had been transformed into a vision of elegance, white roses lining the marble steps, crystal chandeliers refracting sunlight into rainbows, the faint scent of lavender in the air. To the world, it was a celebration of love's triumph over betrayal. But beneath the polished surface, tension was coiled tight, invisible but waiting to snap. And at the heart of it all stood Deacon Sharp, torn between two worlds that could never coexist. He had promised himself that this wedding would be different. No scandals, no shadows, no ghosts from the past. His daughter deserved that much. Hope had worked tirelessly to rebuild her life after the chaos that once surrounded her marriage to Liam Spencer. Now, with vows written, families united, and forgiveness hanging delicately in the air, the last thing Deacon wanted was disruption. But fate had never allowed him peace for long, and it came now in the form of a woman he loved more deeply than he dared to admit, Sheila Carter. She had stood by him when no one else would, believing in the pieces of him even he had stopped believing in. She had fought her demons, sought therapy, promised redemption. For a while, Deacon had let himself believe that love could tame the storm inside her. But that illusion began to crumble the moment his daughter's voice cut through his world like a blade. "She's not coming, Dad," Beth Logan said firmly, her eyes flashing with that same unyielding strength that ran through generations of Logans. "I don't care what you tell her, but Sheila is not setting foot near Hope's wedding." Deacon tried to reason, tried to soften the sharp edges of her fury, but Beth was immovable. "It's not about forgiveness anymore," she said coldly. "It's about protecting what little peace we have left. If Sheila shows up, I walk out. And you can decide what matters more, her or your family." The words hit him harder than she knew. For years, Deacon had been clawing his way back into his daughter's trust. Every good deed, every quiet apology, every step away from the man he once was, it had all been for her. To hear her speak with such finality broke something inside him. But how could he abandon Sheila? How could he look into her eyes and tell her she didn't belong, after everything they'd survived together? He left the Logan house with a hollow ache in his chest, driving aimlessly through the streets until he found himself outside the small apartment he shared with Sheila. When he stepped inside, she was waiting, as if she already knew. The air was thick with unspoken tension. She turned to face him, her green eyes searching his face for the truth. "She said no," Sheila whispered, her voice trembling. "Didn't she?" Deacon hesitated, and that was answer enough. The fragile hope in her eyes shattered, replaced by the cold, familiar glint of a woman who had been betrayed too many times. "So that's it," she said quietly. "After everything I've done, after all the times I've proven I've changed, she still sees me as a monster." Her lips trembled, but her anger came swift and sharp. "And you agree, don't you?" "No," Deacon said quickly, stepping closer. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" Sheila demanded, her voice cracking under the weight of her pain. "You've been my reason to fight, Deacon. You made me believe I could have a future that wasn't built on lies and blood. And now, when I finally try to belong, your family shuts the door in my face. You shut it." Deacon's silence was unbearable. He wanted to hold her, to promise that it would all work out, but he knew that whatever he said would sound hollow. He was standing on a tightrope, and one wrong step would destroy everything: his love, his daughter, his redemption. "Please, Sheila," he said softly. "Just for one day. Let me make this right. I'll talk to her again after the wedding. I'll fix it." Sheila stared at him for a long moment, and then, with a small, bitter laugh, she said, "You still don't get it. You can't fix people who don't want you in their world." Her voice dropped, dark and trembling. "I should have known better than to think I could ever be part of the Logan's fairy tale." That night, she left without a word. 2 days later, Deacon found out where she had gone, and with whom. Luna Nozawa's name appeared in a police report, quietly circulated among law enforcement and tabloids. She had been released from prison pending review, her sentence overturned on procedural grounds, but the woman who stepped out of that facility was no longer the fragile, remorseful girl who once pleaded for forgiveness. Luna had changed. Hardened. The system had broken something in her, and the bitterness had taken root deep. When Sheila found her, she recognized that darkness instantly and knew how to feed it. Their alliance began not with friendship, but with fury. Luna was burning with hatred for the Spencers, especially Bill, whose legal influence had forced her incarceration. They ruined my life, Luna spat the first night Sheila visited her. They used me as their scapegoat, and now they pretend it's all over. Well, I'm not done. Sheila leaned forward, her eyes gleaming with quiet interest. Neither am I. It was a match made in danger. Luna had the intellect and the technology, access to digital trails, surveillance records, encrypted data buried deep in court archives. Sheila had the instincts and the experience, decades of manipulation, an intimate understanding of how powerful families destroyed themselves from the inside out. Together, they began to build something, not an attack, not yet, but a revelation. A carefully orchestrated truth, designed to shatter illusions. Through Luna's encrypted sources, they unearthed something shocking, a pattern of judicial interference linking Bill Spencer and his son Liam to several sealed cases from years prior, cases involving tampered evidence, coerced testimonies, and suppressed charges. It was the kind of discovery that could destroy reputations, topple legacies. For Luna, it was vengeance. For Sheila, it was purpose. But there was something else behind Sheila's calm, something that even Luna didn't fully see. Beneath her rage was heartbreak. Deacon's silence haunted her. Every moment she spent plotting against the Spencers, she thought of him, his voice, his touch, the way he once looked at her as though she were more than her past. But love, she told herself, was a weakness she could no longer afford. When the day of Hope and Liam's wedding arrived, the city seemed to hold its breath. The gardens were luminous, filled with laughter and anticipation. Hope, radiant in white lace, looked like forgiveness personified. Liam, standing at the altar, was all charm and sincerity, though somewhere deep down he knew that his clean slate image rested on secrets long buried. Brooke adjusted her daughter's veil with a tremulous smile, and Bill stood among the guests, his gaze darting across the crowd, ever the watchful patriarch. For a fleeting moment, everything appeared perfect. And then the world began to unravel. At exactly 4:15 p.m., as the ceremony began, phones across the venue buzzed simultaneously. Guests exchanged puzzled glances, whispering as notifications lit up screens. Within seconds, the whispers turned into gasps. Headlines spread like wildfire. Spencer Empire under investigation. Evidence of judicial tampering surfaces in leaked documents. Screens showed scanned files, dates, and transcripts, enough to suggest corruption without proving it outright, but more than enough to spark public outrage. Hope's voice faltered mid-vow as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Brooke's hand tightened around her bouquet. Bill's face turned to stone, and Liam's eyes darted instinctively toward his father. The photographers captured it all, the perfect family tableau cracking under the weight of scandal. The wedding that was meant to unite families had become the flashpoint of their destruction. Meanwhile, across town, Sheila and Luna watched it unfold from a small apartment illuminated by laptop screens. The glow of chaos reflected in their eyes. "They'll tear each other apart," Luna said, her tone almost gleeful. "You've done it." Sheila didn't answer. She just stared at the screen, her face unreadable. The footage of Bill's reaction went viral within minutes. The media spun theories, the public speculated, and within hours, the names of Ridge Forrester and Eric were also drawn into the web as potential beneficiaries of legal manipulations in past design disputes. No one knew where the leak had originated, but whispers pointed toward someone close to the families. Old rivalries reignited. Logan versus Spencer. Spencer versus Forrester. Every alliance fractured under suspicion. Hope fled the ceremony in tears. Liam followed, pleading, but his words bounced off the walls of her disbelief. "You said you were done with secrets," she cried. "You said we were different this time." But deep down, even she knew there were no clean hands in Los Angeles. By the next morning, the Forrester mansion had turned into a war room. Ridge paced like a caged animal, Brooke stood by the window, and Steffi scrolled through her phone, her jaw clenched. "Someone is targeting us," she said coldly. "This isn't random." Brooke's voice trembled. "It's Sheila," she whispered. "It has to be." Ridge nodded grimly. "And if Deacon's involved, don't," Brooke snapped, cutting him off. "He wouldn't do that to Hope. Not now." But even as she said it, doubt gnawed at her. Deacon's silence, since the wedding, had been deafening. Across the city, Deacon sat alone in his apartment, staring at the news replay. He recognized the formatting of the leaked documents, the same style Luna Nozawa had once used when she tried to clear her name. He didn't need proof to know what had happened. And when he saw Sheila's name trending again, he felt the world tilt beneath him. The woman he loved had done this, and he had driven her to it. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. The phone rang into nothingness, again and again, until he smashed it against the counter in frustration. "Damn it, Sheila," he whispered. "What did you do?" Luna, meanwhile, had other plans. For her, the leak was only the beginning. "They deserve to lose everything," she told Sheila as they packed their things to disappear. "You saw how they looked at you, at me. Like we were filth. Let them burn." But Sheila hesitated. Watching the fallout unfold, she saw Deacon's face on the news, heard the pain in his silence. For the first time, the satisfaction of revenge felt hollow. Luna noticed. "Don't tell me you regret this," she said sharply. "You're the one who taught me that love is a weapon." Sheila looked out the window, her voice low. "Love isn't a weapon, Luna. It's what makes the weapons hurt." Days turned into chaos. Investigations were launched, alliances shattered. Brooke confronted Deacon in a storm of accusation and heartbreak. "You promised me she was done," she shouted. "You said she was safe." Deacon didn't defend himself. He couldn't. Every word she said was true. At the same time, Hope tried to salvage her marriage, but the damage was done. Liam's credibility was in ruins, Bill's empire was under siege, and the Logans found themselves isolated. The very unity the wedding was meant to symbolize had become their undoing. And somewhere in the shadows, Sheila and Luna watched the empire crumble, their revenge complete. Yet even victory couldn't silence the ache in Sheila's chest. Deacon's absence hollowed her triumph into loneliness. She thought of the day she met him, of how he saw her, not as a monster, but as a woman trying to be more. That memory haunted her until it was unbearable. In a final act of defiance, she returned to Il Giardino one night, long after closing. Deacon was there cleaning up, exhausted and broken. When he saw her, his face hardened. "You destroyed them," he said quietly. "You destroyed us." Sheila didn't deny it. She only stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I wanted you to choose me," she whispered. "But now I realize, love that demands destruction isn't love at all." He stared at her for a long moment. "Then what was it?" he asked. Sheila smiled faintly, tears glistening. "A mistake worth remembering." She turned to leave, and for the first time, Deacon didn't stop her. By week's end, the tabloids had already written their conclusion, the wedding that ended 3 dynasties. The Logans were fractured, the Forresters in damage control, the Spencers under investigation. But in a quiet corner of Los Angeles, a single truth lingered, that every empire eventually falls not from outside attack, but from the love and lies that live within. And so, beneath the glittering skyline, Deacon Sharp lit a single candle in the dark, unsure if it was for redemption or mourning. Sheila Carter disappeared into the night, leaving behind the wreckage of the only man who ever believed she could change. And somewhere, Luna watched the headlines with a bitter smile, whispering to herself that justice was never pure, only poetic. The wedding was over, but the war had just begun. The afternoon sun over Los Angeles shimmered against the glass windows of Il Giardino, its golden light spilling across polished tables and half-empty wine glasses. The soft hum of conversation filled the air, but beneath it was a quiet current of tension, the kind that lingered unseen until it suddenly changed everything. Deacon Sharp stood behind the bar, his hands steady, his mind not. He moved through the motions with mechanical precision, polishing glasses, pouring drinks, pretending that life had regained some sense of order. But the illusion cracked the moment the door opened and Taylor Hayes stepped in. She hadn't planned to come. She told herself she would stay away, that her work as a therapist didn't justify walking into the restaurant where her mistakes breathed. Yet some invisible pull brought her back, perhaps a mix of guilt, longing, and the impossible hope that closure was still possible. The gentle chime of the door caught Deacon's attention, and when his eyes met hers, time seemed to still. Between them hung the echo of a secret, one reckless night of vulnerability disguised as comfort, now buried under layers of denial. At a corner table, Sheila Carter Sharp turned just in time to see the fleeting exchange. Her lips curved into an unguarded smile, warmth lighting her usually sharp eyes. "Taylor," she exclaimed, waving her hand enthusiastically. "Over here." Deacon stiffened. Taylor froze for a fraction of a second, then composed herself and walked over, each step a silent act of endurance. "Sheila," Taylor greeted softly, forcing her professional smile. "You look well." And she did, at least on the surface. The woman who once thrived on chaos now appeared content, even grateful. Her hair was neat, her expression calm, her laughter disarmingly sincere. She looked, for the first time in years, almost human. But beneath that serenity, something restless still lived, a creature waiting for a reason to breathe fire again. "Oh, I am well," Sheila said eagerly. "And it's all thanks to you, Taylor. You and your therapy sessions, they've changed everything. Deacon and we've never been stronger. You saved our marriage." She clasped Taylor's hand with almost childlike enthusiasm, her voice brimming with conviction. Taylor managed a polite smile, but her stomach twisted. Beside Sheila, Deacon looked away, the faintest trace of guilt flickering across his face. If Sheila noticed, she didn't show it. She was too caught up in her gratitude and her delusion. Taylor's mind raced. Saved their marriage? The words burned. The therapy sessions had been more about self-deception than healing, a controlled environment where she tried to understand Sheila's psyche, not redeem it. And then there was Deacon, the patient she wasn't supposed to see, the man she wasn't supposed to touch. The lines had blurred, and now they were standing on opposite sides of a dangerous truth neither dared to speak. Sheila continued talking, oblivious to the strain. "I've been telling everyone that you're the reason I've found peace. You made me realize that people can change. Even someone like me." She laughed softly, but the laughter carried a sharp undertone. "You know, sometimes I wonder what you see when you look at me. Do you still see a lost cause, or do you see someone worth saving?" The question hung in the air. Taylor's throat went dry. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came. Deacon stepped in quickly, placing a gentle hand on Sheila's shoulder. "She sees progress," he said smoothly. "That's all that matters." But his voice betrayed him. Taylor heard the tremor beneath his calm, and Sheila noticed it too, her eyes narrowing for just a second before she broke into another wide, grateful smile. "Oh, Deacon," Sheila sighed, leaning into him. "You always know what to say." The affection in her tone sounded genuine, but something about it made Taylor's heart race, not with jealousy, but with fear. Because behind Sheila's gratitude, there was curiosity, and curiosity had always been the first spark before the fire. After a few more strained minutes, Taylor made her excuses to leave. "I just wanted to check in," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "I'm glad you're both doing better." Sheila rose to hug her, whispering, "You'll always be part of our story, Taylor. Always." Taylor smiled faintly, but the words echoed in her mind long after she walked out the door. When she was gone, Sheila turned to Deacon, her smile fading. "She's uncomfortable," she said quietly. "You saw it too." Deacon busied himself behind the counter, pretending not to hear. "You're imagining things," he muttered. But Sheila's eyes glinted with a predator's knowing. "Am I?" she whispered. "Or is there something you're not telling me?" Across town, another storm was brewing. In a sleek apartment overlooking the city, Deke Sharp sat at the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. The air around him felt heavy, thick with confusion. Remy Price stood near the window, his reflection fractured by the glass, looking like two men, the one he wanted to be, and the one he feared he still was. They had argued again, the kind of argument that leaves silence ringing louder than words. Deke had discovered that Remy, in a fit of jealousy and emotional instability, had lashed out at Elector Forrester during a public event. It wasn't violent, not exactly, but it had been enough to reignite every dark headline about Remy's past. Every attempt at redemption he had made was now hanging by a thread. "Remy," Deke said finally, his voice quiet but strained. "You need help. Real help. Not promises, not apologies. You need therapy." Remy turned slowly, his eyes glassy with desperation. "You think I don't know that? You think I want to be this person?" His voice cracked. "I'm trying, Deke. I'm trying so damn hard." Deke wanted to believe him. He loved Remy, or at least the man he believed Remy could be. But love couldn't erase fear. "Trying isn't enough," Deke said, his voice breaking. "You hurt someone. Again. And if you can't control it, I can't stay." The silence that followed was unbearable. Remy's face crumpled, a mixture of shame and disbelief. "You're leaving me?" he whispered. "No," Deke said, shaking his head. "I'm asking you to leave, until you can come back as someone who isn't drowning." Remy nodded slowly, his eyes empty. "I'll go," he said. "But don't wait for me." He grabbed his jacket and walked out without another word. When the door closed, Deke sank back, his body trembling. The moral line he had drawn felt like a wound rather than a victory. Remy wandered the city for hours before ending up in the one place that still haunted him, the prison complex where Luna Nozawa was serving her sentence. She was the last person he should have gone to, but desperation made fools of everyone. He used a favor to get a visitor's pass, and when Luna saw him through the glass partition, she smirked. "I was wondering when you'd show up," she said. "You look terrible." "I need advice," Remy admitted. "You're the only one who might understand." Luna laughed softly, shaking her head. "Oh, Remy, you're still chasing redemption? Take it from me, it doesn't exist. The world doesn't want us fixed. They want us to stay broken so they can feel better about themselves." He leaned closer. "Then what do I do?" Her eyes darkened. "You stop trying to be what they want. You take control of your story." Remy frowned. "You mean lie?" "No," Luna said with a smirk. "I mean survive." Her words sent a chill through him. When the guards called time, he left feeling both empowered and poisoned. Luna had planted something in him, a seed of defiance that might either save him or destroy him. Meanwhile, at Il Giardino, Deacon cleaned the counter long after closing time. The restaurant was empty now, but the tension lingered like perfume. Sheila had gone home, though not before asking one last time, "Is there something you're not telling me?" Deacon had laughed it off, but inside, he was shaking. He poured himself a drink, then stopped halfway. Taylor's scent still lingered faintly on the air, and it was enough to twist his stomach with longing and guilt. When he finally closed up and stepped outside, the night air was cool and sharp. He leaned against the door, staring up at the stars, faint pinpricks of light barely visible through the city's haze. Somewhere out there, Taylor was probably doing the same, trying to convince herself that what happened between them had been a mistake. He wanted to believe that too, but every time he tried, the memory replayed like a film he couldn't turn off. Her eyes, her touch, her voice whispering his name as if she wanted to forget it the moment it left her lips. He was about to leave when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Taylor. "We need to talk." His stomach dropped. He didn't reply. Some truths were safer left unsaid, at least for now. The next morning, Taylor sat at her office, staring at the clock. Each tick was louder than the last. She couldn't focus on her patients, her notes, or even her breathing. The guilt was consuming her, spreading through her like a slow fever. When she heard a knock on her door, she expected it to be Deacon. But when the door opened, it was Sheila. "Taylor," Sheila said softly, stepping inside. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by. I needed to talk." Taylor stood, trying to mask her surprise. "Of course," she said carefully. "What's on your mind?" Sheila's eyes shimmered with a strange mix of gratitude and sadness. "I wanted to thank you again for everything. You gave me a second chance when no one else would." Taylor nodded, her heart pounding. "You've made progress, Sheila. I'm proud of you." Sheila smiled faintly, then took a step closer. "Am I the only one who's changed?" she asked. "Because something tells me you're not as at peace as you pretend to be." The words hit their mark. Taylor froze, her professional calm cracking just enough for Sheila to see the truth. A slow, knowing smile crept across Sheila's lips. "You and Deacon," she whispered. "I knew it." Taylor's breath caught. "You're mistaken," she said, but Sheila only laughed, softly, almost kindly. "Don't worry, Taylor. Your secret's safe with me for now." When Sheila left, Taylor sank into her chair, trembling. She knew what that meant. Sheila's gratitude had just turned into leverage. By evening, the city seemed to pulse with unseen tension. At the Spencer estate, Bill was on a call with his legal team, unaware that his name was being whispered in conversations across town, by Remy, who was planning a reckless act of redemption, by Deke, who was questioning every choice he'd made, by Taylor, who was staring at her phone, debating whether to call Deacon or confess everything to Brooke before Sheila could weaponize it. And by Sheila herself, who stood on her balcony, wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker like fire. "People never change," she murmured to herself. "They just learn new ways to hide." Yet even as she said it, she felt the faintest tremor of something unfamiliar. Not guilt, but awareness. Gratitude, perhaps, or the ghost of it. For all her manipulations, Taylor had seen her as something more than a monster, and that small act of faith had begun to erode the edges of her armor. But Sheila Carter had survived too long to mistake weakness for redemption. If Taylor's mistake came to light, she would not hesitate to use it. Because love for Sheila was never